Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day. I really hate that we couldn't spend more time on the genetics chapter right before where we were right before spring break, but we just got to move on. And so we are moving on to animal anatomy and physiology, and we'll encompass some behavior in with that as well. But we're going to break it off into two sections. The first will be the A and P side, and the second will be the behavior side. And so I'm going to go over some notes with you. I'm not going to go too in depth. We'll cover some more on Wednesday in our meeting. Don't forget that we're having a meeting at 2 o'clock via Zoom. And so with that being said, I will go into some of what we'll be covering. And so we're going to be looking at the 11 body systems and their basic functions. When I say basic, I mean we'll go real brief into what happens in each system, because we can't spend, well, if we were to go in depth, we would spend way more time in this chapter than we really need to. And so there's a whole class called A&P that you can take, but this just very briefly breaks it down, especially in kind of terms of how it relates to what we're studying with animals in zoology. So the first thing you need to know is that there's a difference between A&P, or anatomy and physiology. Don't confuse them. They are two separate different structures that you're not structures but studies. And so anatomy is going to be the study of the structures. Think of the actual memorizing of the body parts themselves. And then physiology will be more of the study of the function in living organisms. Some of these systems I've given you the actual parts. Some of them I didn't really list a lot of the parts, because that would be a lot of memorization for this one chapter. But I did go into the physiology or function of every system here. So we'll be looking at organs, which are a collection of tissues that perform a specific function together. Think about the brain, the kidney, the liver, the heart, or even bone or muscle, for example. And those organs will be gathered together into organ systems, which is a group of organs that work together for a common purpose. And there are 11 of those, and we're going to spend the next couple of minutes looking at each of those systems. So the first one that we're going to look at is the integumentary system, which is going to be the skin. And so what your skin does is going to protect against injury. It's going to maintain water balance. Here I can zoom in a little bit more as we go through these so you can see them a little bit better. All right, and so with this, like I said, protects against injury, maintains water balance. It's going to excrete various substances like sweat, which will get rid of some of the waste that are nearby that area. It's also going to provide thermoregulation. So when you get cold, when you get those chills or goosebumps, and what's happening is you have these erector pili muscles that are contracting underneath, causing these hairs to stand up. That's what causes those things. And so it's going to help provide thermoregulation when you're cold. Also, the whole idea of shivering, that goes more into muscles, but still plays in some with the integumentary system. You also have the ability to receive stimuli, such as pain, temperature, and pressure. You can feel all of those things on your skin. Perhaps all at the same time if you were to touch something hot like an oven. So don't do that though. And so just to look at this image here, you can see the different kind of layers. You have several different layers of skin on the top end, or the epidermis, that you would have to go through, that are labeled there. You can go through and memorize those if you so choose to. I'm not going to ask a whole lot of questions over that. However, you do need to know the three regions of the integumentary system, which would be the epidermis, which is the top, the dermis is the middle, and then the hypodermis, which would be the bottom. And then knowing I might ask you a question again about that erector pili muscle since I asked you a question about it. Just notice where kind of your arteries and veins are, where the nerve tissue is going to lie. And so really I'm going to be asking you more physiology questions than anatomy questions in these. All right, the skeletal system is made up of many different types of bones, as you can see. There's long bones, flat bones, short bones, and irregular bones. Those are the different types of bones. Not going to make you memorize all of the different ones for this chapter. Different areas that apply to the skeletal system are joints, which would be a junction between two bones. You have a tendon, which is more, well, it's in between bone and muscle, because the skeletal system and the muscular system, because it's going to connect the two. So tendons will be where muscle attaches to bone. Cartilage will be in between bones that'll form a cushion, and then ligaments will connect bone to bone. The process of hematopoiesis, which is the formation of new red blood cells, occurs in the center of our bones in the bone marrow. The skeletal system will also help with calcium regulation, but its main function will be here in terms of giving structure, support, and protection to the body. It provides the framework that everything else fits into. The muscular system. There are three main types of tissue or muscle tissue. You have skeletal muscle tissue, which is voluntary, which means you can control it. It's going to attach to skeleton, and it'll be allow you to move your arms, turn your head, and anything active that you do, it allows you to do it. The other two are cardiac and smooth. Both of those are involuntary, which means that you don't have to control those. They work on their own. And so cardiac will be found in the heart, and it's responsible for the pumping of blood. It's what your heart is made out of, cardiac tissue. Smooth will be found in things like your esophagus and in your intestines and things like that. It's going to be responsible for moving material through the body. Example I gave you there is digestion. And so it will move and push things through the body, and those are things you don't have to think about because it's an involuntary process. The functions of muscle tissue in general to produce movement or posture. Muscles will help stabilize joints, and so when you combine that with the ability to move, it allows you to stand up in a upright or whatever kind of position that you would need to be in. And then also muscles, as you contract your muscles, heat is going to be released as a byproduct of that energy being used, and so that's why you often sweat or get hot when you exercise or move or work out, because of all that energy being released as heat as a byproduct of using that energy. Cardiovascular system, looking at it, I really hate that we aren't together and we can't actually dissect and do this in person. That's a real shame, and I'm sorry we aren't going to get to go stick our hands in the cow. That was probably the saddest thing about in terms of not having actual class. But with the cardiovascular system, the heart, so obviously going to be the main organ, and then you'll have arteries and capillaries and veins. Arteries and veins are going, let me go back and talk about the heart real quick. The heart's going to produce blood pressure within the system of the body. So this system is a closed loop, and as blood flows into the heart's going to pump, which is going to cause pressure. And because the heart is pumping in these rhythmic contractions, it's going to send pulse after pulse through those vessels, and that's what's going to move blood through the body. Arteries are going to be the vessels that carry blood away from the heart, and the veins will be what bring blood back to the heart. So as blood moves from the heart through the arteries, it'll eventually make its way to various tissues all over the body, where the arteries will turn into these capillaries. These capillaries are thinner than the arteries are, and so they are going to allow gas exchange in the tissue, where oxygen-rich blood will be dumped off into the tissues, and deoxygenated blood will be picked up by the veins, and then that deoxygenated blood is carried back to the heart, where it's pumped to the lungs to drop off carbon dioxide and pick up that oxygen and become oxygen-rich again. And that ties into the respiratory system. Different parts of the respiratory system. You have the pharynx, which, if we were talking about where that would happen, it would be further up this way, the pharynx. The pharynx is behind like the nose and the mouth, and then that's where that area where the nose, mouth, and all that's connected. That's why if you are drinking something and you laugh too hard, that pressure as it upwells will then cause the fluids to come out of your nose. It's all connected back there. It flows into the larynx and then into the trachea, which then splits once it gets to the lungs into bronchi, bronchioles, and eventually the alveoli, which are the little air sacs in the lungs where that gas exchange happens, where that blood can pick up the oxygen and dump off the carbon dioxide. The respiratory system includes both inspiration and expiration. Inspiration would be breathing in, expiration would be breathing out, which doing both of those provides an exchange of respiratory gases. And then as you breathe in, as air moves down your esophagus, your trachea, and then into your lungs, the air is going to be warmed and cleaned and purified. There'll be it'll be almost humidified, because you can't take in cold or just regular dry air. That would hurt your lungs. And so it has to warm it and then clean it and make sure that there's some moisture in there so that you can breathe right. All right, digestive system. It's going to be one long tube from starting at the mouth, working its way all around, back and forth for a very long time until it finally makes its way out at the anus. There, it's going to be one long continuous tube no matter what animal you're looking at. You can even throw humans in here as well. We can see how you can move from the esophagus down into the stomach. Herbivores are going to have much larger stomachs. They're going to have extra chambers to digest the grass and vegetation things that they eat, whereas herbivores and carnivores will have more of a stomach that we would see in humans, something that's more familiar to us. And so then from the stomach we move through the small intestine, then into the large intestine, and then out through the rectum and then out the anus. And so parts of the digestive system, the processes include ingestion, which is taking in or eating. And then you have both mechanical and chemical digestion. Mechanical would be the act of chewing. Chemical would be the saliva in your mouth interacting with the food that you're eating, creating a bolus, which is then pushed down through the esophagus through mechanical, as that smooth muscle we talked about earlier pushes it down to the stomach, where more chemical digestion happens and breaks the food down even further. As it moves into the intestines, both the small and large, we'll see an absorption of nutrients and water. And then after the nutrients have been taken out and after the water's been taken out, that material begins to solidify a little bit and it forms stool, which is then excreted as waste through defecation. But the whole point of this system is that it's going to provide the body with energy-rich nutrients. The urinary system, which is made up of your kidneys, the veins and arteries that carry blood to the kidneys, the ureters, the bladder, and the urethra. The whole function of this is to maintain that water, electrolyte, and blood pH balance, keeping you from going into different kinds of dehydration and other kind of problems where your blood becomes too acidic. That can make you sick. If it becomes too alkalytic, it can be just as bad. And so it's trying to keep your body at homeostasis as much as possible. That's why your kidneys are so important, and you need to take care of them. Does a job with blood filtration, which means it pumps blood to the kidneys where they are going to be cleaned and filtered, and the blood gets sent back up to the heart. And then obviously the whatever is filtrated out through that is going to be stored in the urine and then eliminated. It's stored in the bladder, and then obviously it's eliminated out through the urethra there at the bottom of that. The lymphatic system is going to be our body's immune system. It's going to remove excess fluid from blood tissues. It'll absorb fatty acids. It's responsible for producing immune cells, and it helps combat infection, mostly because it's going to have, the fluid is taken from the body tissues, the blood that's with it, it'll have an amount of white blood cells in it that'll help combat and fight those infections. And so this is our body's immune response system. Next system is the nervous system, made up of two parts: the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral, which are the nerve or the neurons that are going to be branching out from this brain and spinal cord. Brain's the central processing center. The brain is then connected to the rest of the nerves via the spinal cord. Somatic nerves are going to control your voluntary movements or muscles and things. Autonomic would be those involuntary responses, like in those involuntary muscles we talked about earlier. The neurons, which are the nerve cell, are going to relay and receive information through electrochemical signals, and it'll be responsible for controlling a lot of what you do in your body and how you take information in, how you perceive it, and then respond to that information or that stimuli. The next system is the endocrine system, and it's going to be very similar. The endocrine system and the nervous system are going to work together in terms of controlling and regulating our body. The nervous system does it through releasing electrochemical signals. The endocrine system does it through releasing hormones into the body. And so to release hormones, those hormones will then set off and tell organs to do things or to not do things. It'll regulate growth and development, tissue function at various levels in the body. But it's going to keep, and like the urinary system, this will work to keep or maintain homeostasis. All of the systems, in theory, would work and do that, but endocrine and urinary have a larger purpose in doing that. So, and then the last one is the reproductive system. Obviously, your main organs for the male would be the testes and the penis. For the female, it would be the ovaries, the vagina, and the uterus. The testes are going to be responsible for producing sperm and testosterone, the male sex hormone. Ovaries would produce the eggs for reproduction, as well as estrogen and progesterone. Vagina will be used as the birth canal and the entryway for intercourse. And then the uterus itself will house the egg or the embryo, assuming we're talking about animals that carry and not lay eggs for in terms of development and carrying offspring. The function of this controls sex characteristics and provides means to produce offspring. We'll talk more about these systems when we have our meeting in terms of talking about our project we're going to be doing to work with these. But hope this was helpful and a little bit insightful into understanding more about these systems. And so I hope you can use this to go through your notes, learn more, and I will see you on Wednesday.